Hey guys, it's Graham. What's crackin'? We're moving into the next section of What So Proudly We Hail, which focuses more on short fiction with instructive themes. The first piece is by American author Jack London, who fit a great deal of adventuring and writing into his 40-year life. Contrary to what I consider core American values, London was an advocate of socialism, but I don't have a comment on his opinions there as I have not read his writings on the matter. Like most American readers, I'm more familiar with his stories about the natural world. I read White Fang in the 6th grade, and finally got around to The Call of the Wild last year. In What So Proudly We Hail, I was introduced to a short story of his called To Build a Fire, and it has the signature elements of a Jack London tale in the Yukon. Cold men, cold dogs, cold weather, and the cold reality of surviving in such a harsh environment. In reading this story, I was reminded a little of Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. It's a story of man versus nature that doesn't follow the typical structure with an arc and a changed protagonist. In a sense, the main characters in both of these stories don't really change, though they do experience something incredible in their own lives. After I read The Old Man and the Sea in 2012, I told Dr. Farmer that I thought it was a beautiful piece of writing, but I couldn't understand why. What was the point? A guy goes on a fishing trip off the coast of Cuba, catches a huge marlin, and fails to profit off of it like he needed to? My brother's response was simple and accurate. It affirms courage. That story was about a man who faced staggering odds to achieve his goal, and he didn't give up, despite having every excuse to do so. Stories like that matter in our cultural consciousness because they embody values that we ought to hold. I think the same can be said of To Build a Fire. The premise is this. We have an unnamed protagonist, a mountain man trekking across the Yukon in ridiculously cold weather. He's prospecting for logs, looking for a better way to get timber back to civilization. His only company is a dog, a big, cold weather husky. He was told not to go that route alone because two men in such conditions can look out for each other, but he goes anyway. Although he has initial success, he is eventually overwhelmed by the cold. His matches get wet and freeze, and he's unable to build the fire that he needs in order to save himself. He dies, and the husky leaves him looking for other humans who can build a fire. Pretty bleak, but there is instruction here. Rugged individualism has been part of the American character since the beginning, though it can be taken to extremes and with dire consequences. There's also the fact that the man felt up to the challenge, and the only way to know was to take it on and see if he could make it on his own terms. A beautiful sentiment, sure, but that sentiment alone will not save you if you are ill-prepared. Which brings me to what I think is the main crux of this story. Our protagonist was warned, and he ignored the warning. A warning that came from someone who knew the territory, who had done before what this man was setting out to do. This man thought that the hazards didn't apply to him as severely as they applied to others, and he was wrong. Now, I'm probably looking at this with my own biases. That might not have been what Jack London was saying with this story, it's just something that stood out to me. I think back often to the famous Ben Franklin quote about America, that we have a republic if we can keep it. The American Republic, as a form of government, is a fire in a frozen wasteland. In the 21st century, it is the longest-lived republic in the world, though it has changed rather drastically since its inception. Our tax structure, our method of electing the national legislature, and the delegation of authority to alphabet soup agencies is a far cry from how the country was built. What we ought to ask ourselves is, are we taking this fire into a place it can't survive? And if it goes out, can we start it up again? Or are we looking at soggy gloves and stiff fingers, trying to peel apart frozen matches in the snow, with nobody around to look out for us? Like any good story with a moral, it doesn't tell you what the answer should be. It asks a valid question, and the decision you come to will largely depend on what you value. Though I suppose if you get the answer wrong, it won't start the fire for you. Food for thought, as Jack London tells us how to build a fire. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please like the video if you will, so YouTube will recommend my stuff to more viewers. Drive safe. I'll see you out there.